question. He then said to me, what else do you want to know? I said, do you believe in truth? He said, what do you mean by truth? I said, well, that certain things are a certain way. He said, like what? He kept pinning me down, forced me to answer. I said, well, this is smooth. He says, you really believe that, don't you? I said, yes, I do. He showed me under a microscope and it looked rough as hell. I said, is that what it's really like? He said, no. He blew it up more and it looked like slivers. I said, is that what it's really like? He said, we can't see things it's really like. We can only see things as our receptors interpret. Then I said, and the whole world is based on our receptors and our responses that we're brought up with and our values. He said, now you got it. I said, what about social change? Do you believe in social change? He said, I'm a socialist. Einstein said that to me. I said, I never read that anywhere in any of your books or pamphlets. He said, when I left Germany, people said, never talk socialism when you get to America. They'll ship your ass right back to Germany. So he never talked about it. He was afraid he would lose his job. He got a job at Princeton. Anyway, I said, what do you think of social change? He says, well, I think it's necessary, but I don't know enough about it to give you detail. And so I left it at that. And then my principal gave me a letter to the chief of the Heat and Power Division of the Bureau of Standards. And he said, I went to Washington, I hitchhiked to Washington. He said, we can't hire you, you're just a kid. And he said, you ought to meet a guy named Bucky Fuller. This is like 65 years ago. And when I met Bucky Fuller, he was working on an automobile he called a Dymaxium. He said, that's the highest form that can be attained, those words. So I said to him, the best design you make of a computer today would not be the Dymaxium, it would be the best computer we know of up to now. We cannot design the best car, the best airplane. There's no such thing as utopia. He didn't know what I was talking about. So I cut out. I asked him for social change. He said, at that time, 65 years ago, he was not social. So I stopped talking with him as a kid. What made me so different was my grandfather. He said to me, Jacque, people came from all over the world to America, and they brought with them the printing press, language, different ideas, religion. He said, and Louis Pasteur was a Frenchman, and maybe, he said, we're all alive because of this Frenchman. So he said, never pledge allegiance to any one flag. If you want to, pledge allegiance to the earth and everyone on it. And never pollute the earth, and never pollute the oceans, and never accept war as a solution to a problem. When he said never pledge allegiance to the flag, I said, gee, that makes sense. So the teacher, when I was in junior grade school, said, we're all going to pledge allegiance to the flag. Says, I can't do that. She said, what do you mean you can't do that? Everybody does it. I says, I can't. It's against my upbringing. So she grabbed me by the ear right to the principal's office. And she said, he doesn't want to pledge allegiance to the flag. So the principal said to the teacher, you're excused. The minute she left, he put his arm around me. He said, why don't you want to pledge allegiance? Everybody pledged allegiance to the flag. I said, everybody once believed the earth was flat. That doesn't make it flat. He said, what do you think of American history? I said, sir, I have to dispense with all the BS, bad science, and be frank with you, can I? He says, the only way to be. I said, history is false, because we won the war, we wrote the book. If Germany won the war, the book would have been different. And all the people in the history books always say the right thing, and everything they do is right. And we don't know that, because I said, he said, what do you think of our teaching method? I said, awful. He said, what's the matter with it? I said, when I spelled cat with a K as a kid, the teacher said, that's wrong. Those words, that's wrong, doesn't tell me what's wrong. It's just words. And the teacher said, that's not what I told you. That doesn't tell me anything. She said, we use a C instead of a K. That would tell me right away. And I learned that when I didn't understand how airplanes can fly on this thin substance. So I asked my folks, they didn't know. And they said, why don't you go to the library and get a book out on the Wright brothers? So I did that, but I was shaking because I always wanted to know, but I never knew where to get the information. So I got the book out and I opened it real fast, and it says it was a sunny day in May and Mrs. Orville Wright was hanging clothing on the line. That bothered me, because that wasn't what I wanted to know. The whole book was sunny day in May, except near the end of the book they killed a pigeon and the wings dropped. And they put wires in to keep the wings out, and they moved the wings forward and backward and glided the pigeon. That was information. The rest of the book was sunny day in May, how she used to cook for the boys, and they had a bicycle shop. I didn't want to know that. I want to know how airplanes fly. There's so much information coming today that we don't have time for sunny day in May. Then I found out, which I didn't know, that writers got paid by the amount of words they use. So it's a lot of sunny day in May in books. And I learned to read scratching sunny day in May. Do you know what I mean? Every book you buy is bullshit and very little real information. So anyway, that happened to me right away. And airplanes dropped pamphlets that said, come to California, lots of jobs. So I started a hitchhike to California. I took the train and ferry boat to New Jersey, then I started hitchhiking. This woman drives up in a brand new car. She must have weighed about 300 pounds. She had a big hat with a big rim with cherries. All that was normal, to wear a hat with cherries and all kinds of feathers and different colors. And she didn't even open the door of the car. She opened part of the way. She said, are you a Christian? I said, what else? She said, get in. So I got in the car and I fell asleep, and she poked me in the ribs. She said, not sleeping in my car. I said, what do you want me to do? I want you to sing all the way to Texas. I said, what do you want me to sing? Jesus loved me, that I know, because the Bible tells me so. I had to sing all the way to Texas. Anyway, I knew she didn't understand the Bible. That helped me. And I was brought up in a world very different than the average kid. I left school when I was 13 years old, junior grade. And I played hooky. I left home with books, but went to the library and read what I wanted to read, and skipped sunny day in May. And anyway, one day when I came home, the truant officer was sitting on my doorstep. That's the guy that makes sure kids go to school. He said, you haven't been to school for a month. I said, 6 weeks. He said, you're right. What do you do when you're not in school? Do you sell drugs, hang out in gangs? I said, no. I have a little lab at home. He said, can I see it? I said, only if you don't tell my mother who you are, because she wouldn't understand it. He agreed. And he said, look, you're not doing anything bad. I can't say you're wrong. He was a very unusual guy. He says, you can do me a favor, show up Monday. It just means I did my job. So I did that, and I never went back to school again. Okay? That was a very different background. So I hitchhiked toward California, tried to get a job there. What happened is, I went to a farm that dropped these pamphlets, come to California. He said, will you work for 15 cents an hour? Will you work for 8 cents an hour? And they took the lowest bidder. So I went to an aircraft factory and says, I'd like a job. They said, what are your qualifications? So I don't have any. He says, we can't hire you. So I showed him some of my drawings. The guy says, you're hired. I said, what do you want me to do? well, what would you like to do? I said, well, I'd like to work on the safety devices for aircraft, no weapons. He said, you're on. So he roped off the back of the engineering department, and I did nothing but what I thought airplanes needed. And he said to me, well, I said to him, I don't know what you need. What do you need? He said, when a big plane lands, the rubber tires wear out very fast, and they cost $10,000, a rubber tire. Can you do anything to ease that? So I put vanes in the middle of the wheel, so when the landing gear came down, the wind would turn the wheel, and the rubber tire wouldn't wear out as much. And he said to me the first 3 weeks I was there, you made more contributions in 3 weeks than the history of aviation. I said, thank you. I want you to meet the chief aerodynamicist. And he told him that I didn't believe in the Bernoulli principle. And the guy came over and says, I don't even want to talk to you if you don't believe in the Bernoulli principle. Bernoulli principle is how the lift comes from the top of the wing. Air flowing over a wing creates a partial vacuum. And 2/3 of the lift comes from the top. So I built a wing. In order to deflect the air up to create this partial vacuum, you take a downward load. And anyway, he didn't want to talk to me. So he said, well, he's a hardhead, the guy that hired me. That's the first time I met a scientist that didn't say, what do you mean by you disagree? You know, he didn't inquire. And I found that some scientists were scientific, others were not. And scientists used to write books on why man can't fly. Just say, I can't conceive of how to build a flying machine, but you don't write a book on why man can't fly.